Welcome back to the Mental Game podcast. I'm your host, Nick Mathur. I'm going to start off this podcast with a burning question. Do you ever feel that you care too much what other people think? Whether that's at work, university, or in general public. For example, what that other person is thinking about your t-shirt, or the way you're walking, or the music you're listening to, or the wallpaper on your phone, or the colors you like, or the things you like, or your hobbies. Do you ever put too much focus on what other people think about you? Well, we're going to strike this and really touch upon this in today's podcast episode. And I've created a small agenda, which I aim to follow and ensure we touch upon in today's podcast. The first one is, why do we actually care? And this is going to be from an evolutionary standpoint. The second objective is what this does to us and how this impacts us on a day-to-day basis. And the third objective and final one is, how do you recognize these impacts and mitigate or minimize them, or use them to our advantage? So let's touch upon the first objective. Why do we actually care what other people think about us? Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, and let's go all the way back to the caveman era. In order to survive during those times, it was extremely hard to survive as a solo individual, as a lone wolf. The probability of survival if you were alone was very, very low. In order to survive back then, people survived in groups. And in order to be a part of a group, you had to be favored or favorable to be selected. Or you had to be liked. Now, how were you liked? You were liked because of your traits, your attributes, the way you acted maybe, your skill traits, the person you are maybe, the personality, and so on. And essentially, you had to be liked and part of a group. You had to be accepted as part of a group in order to survive. And this was during the caveman era. Now, evolution has worked its way all the way to today's date, today's era. And we can see its impact on individuals in today's world. In today's world, there's the same philosophy of wanting to be liked and accepted. It's all because of this evolutionary standpoint and how being part of a group makes us stronger. Being part of a collective whole results in a higher probability of success and survival. Now, touching upon the second objective, why does this impact us in today's world? Why does caring what other people think impact us in today's world? Well, this was extremely beneficial during the caveman era, because let's, out of all honesty, imagine us, visualize ourselves in the caveman era. Visualize ourselves around lions, wolves, the need to make food, gather resources, and so on. And imagine that as a lone individual, as a person by themselves. Now you're probably thinking that's absolutely very hard. That would be really tough if I was alone. I had to cook food. I had to gather resources, build houses, get items, and so on. And as a lone individual, that would be a very hard task. Contradictory, if you're a part of a group where you had different individuals with different expertises and support, it would be much easier to survive. Now, this is not the same in today's world. And in some way, it is the same, because if you're liked, if you're accepted as part of a group, whether that's a business or a company, your chance of success is much higher. Your chance of feeling that content within you is much higher. Because essentially when you're accepted, you get to be part of a group, you get to do what you want, and so on. However, many people, and including myself, have done this extensively. And let me give you an example. Often many of the emotions, whether that's and majority of these emotions could be adversely impacting your life. And let me talk about it. One of the emotions being anxiety. Normally anxiety is caused because you care too much what other people think. And often you care too much what other people think because you want to be accepted, you want to be liked. And you see the link to the evolutionary standpoint. So the problem is when our emotions are tied to the fact that we want to be part of a group. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. And often these emotions are cultivated in quite irrelevant times. Now, I suffered with, I was quite anxious during my younger years, and even now, where I care too much of what bystanders think of me, what people on the street think of me, what people I don't even know think of me, whether that's walking in the office, whether that's in public, and so on. And I tie my emotions to the fact that I want to be accepted by them, I want to be liked by them. But the truth is, why does it matter if I'm accepted by them? Why does it matter if I'm liked by them? Why tie my emotions to these irrelevant thoughts, these irrelevant needs to be accepted? Why be accepted by people who don't really matter? Where instead, what you should be focusing on, and what's really better in my opinion, is focusing on accepting yourself. And once you accept yourself, and I talked about this maybe in my second episode or third episode, once you actually accept yourself, there's no need to alter who you are. There's no need to change who you are. Because this automatically results in you being accepted by other people. And that's the power of, realizing when our emotions are actually tied to our evolutionary experiences or evolutionary roots. So this is the reason why we care so much what other people think. And this is how it impacts us on a day-to-day basis. Because in today's world, people tie their emotions heavily to being accepted by people. And because of this, subsequently, this results in them changing their personality, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they do things, and they listen to the noise, they try to be accepted, and so on. What does this result in? It leads to more anxiety, more stress, fakeness, a facade essentially. And all of this is because we want to be accepted, part of a group. Because this increases our chance of survival. And you can see how this is detrimental when we extensively do this. I'm not saying wanting to be liked is a bad thing, as after all, that's how we get the job we want. That's how we integrate into society. But the problem arises is when we extensively care what other people think. And this causes a number of emotions which are unfavorable. Let's touch upon the last point. How do we start recognizing and acting? Well, this is through awareness. Simple as that. Whether you're walking down a street, in the office, at university, in class, and whenever you feel that you start caring what other people think, whether that's through your anxiety, stress, or so on, realize that this is all because of our evolutionary roots. We want to be accepted, we want to be liked. And then think, does this person liking us result in a higher chance of survival? Does it really? Doesn't really matter what they think. And if the answer is simply no, then why care? I know it sounds very simple, and simply isn't that simple. But if you start getting into the practice of being aware of when you care too much what other people think, and it's resulting in unfavorable emotions, it's so powerful because you're able to rewire your brain to think of a different scenario, a different way of thinking. Or instead, if you're feeling anxious, oh no, this person is thinking about me, he may not accept me, she may not accept me, and so on, and you realize, oh, but it doesn't matter because my survival doesn't matter on what they think of me. Instead, it really matters of what I think of myself and being accepted by the relevant people, whether that's at my job or whether that's my family and so on. It doesn't really matter what these people think of me because my survival is not attached to that. It's simply not attached to that. So why beat myself up? Why generate these adverse emotions? And if you question this, if you sit with your emotions, if you start questioning your emotions and realizing that these are irrelevant, you start to become more powerful. You start to have and acquire the power to control your thoughts and emotions. And that's the end of today's podcast episode. By this time, you guys should know, why do we care so much what other people think? And I want you guys to write down an answer to this. One-liner, just one line or one word. Why do we care what other people think? How does this impact us in today's world? Both the positive and negative. There are two strings to this, positive and negative. And lastly, how can we act upon this? How awareness can be used to minimize the impacts of caring too much and so on. And these are the core objectives you guys should know by the end of today's episode. And that's the end. And I really appreciate you guys really sitting with me in today's episode and really listening to the information I'm trying to relay. And this episode was quite hard to actually film, to be honest, because there were so many contemplations coming through my head, because there's so many discussions I could have about this topic. There's just so many, because there's so many perspectives I can acquire, and there's many ideologies I could understand. And I would love to talk to somebody about this and the psychology and the evolutionary standpoints and so on. So if anyone wants to discuss it, if anyone wants to collaborate, please put it in the comments and so on. Thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a brilliant week, whether that's at work, university, or wherever. Go and rock it. And yeah, see you and bye-bye.